Wide-ranging 60 Minutes interview, brash, defiant, but offering as well some head-scratching explanations on issues from climate change to Russia to the future of his own cabinet. But bottom line, he says that after nearly 21 months in office, he finally feels at home in the White House. But he also adds there are people inside his own administration he just can't trust. I've got a great team to help me break it all down. But first, I want to get you up to speed on what's going on. Any minute now, the president and first lady are expected to leave the White House, heading for Florida, where they will get a firsthand look at the massive devastation left behind by Hurricane Michael. Trump leaves behind a city he describes as being full of backstabbers that puts former business rivals to shame.
I always used to say the toughest people are Manhattan real estate guys and blah, blah. Now I say they're babies.
Who's the toughest?
The political people. This is the most deceptive, vicious world. It is vicious. It's full of lies, deceit, and deception. You make a deal with somebody, and it's like making a deal with that table.
As for himself, the president says he's grown accustomed to the job he's now held for, get this, 634 days. Here's what he said.
I do. I feel like the president. You know, for a little while, it's like, Mr. President, sir. It's even my friends, they call me, they don't call me Donald anymore, they call me Mr. President. I say, will you please loosen up? I've learned on the job, I have.
And you feel comfortable?
I feel very comfortable, yeah.
Now, one of the most fascinating aspects of the interview is where the president focuses his anger and where he doesn't. Asked about his relationships with foreign leaders, he once again lashed out at traditional allies and defended his, quote, good chemistry with longstanding adversaries like North Korea's Kim Jong-un.
I want to read you his resume, okay? He presides over a cruel kingdom of repression, gulags, starvation, reports that he had his half-brother assassinated, slave labor, public executions. This is a guy you love.
I know all these things. I mean, I'm not a baby. I know all these things.
But why do you love that guy?
Look. I get along with him, okay?
But you said you love him.
Okay, that's just like a figure of speech.
No, it's like an embrace.
Well, let it be an embrace. Let it be whatever it is to get the job done.
He's a bad guy.
Look, let it be whatever it is. I get along with him really well. I have a good energy with him. I have a good chemistry with him. I have a great chemistry also with President Xi of China. I don't know that that's necessarily going to continue. We have wonderful relationships with a lot of people, but nobody treats us much worse than the European Union. The European Union was formed in order to take advantage of us on trade, and that's what they've done.
Throughout the interview, the president takes shots at his favorite punching bags, the press, Democrats, and Washington politicians. He was also pretty tough on his own cabinet.
I think I have a great cabinet. There are some people that I'm not happy with.
Who are you not happy with?
I don't want to say that. But
come on.
No, I don't want to say that. But I have some people that I'm not thrilled with, and I have other people that I'm beyond thrilled with.
The First Lady.
Yes.
Melania. She said that there are still people in the White House that she doesn't trust and that you shouldn't trust.
I feel the same way. I don't trust everybody in the White House. I'll be honest with you.
Let me bring in NBC's Peter Alexander, who's live at the White House for us. Good morning to you, Peter. So the president's got a really busy week. He's going to be doing a lot of midterm stuff. But let's talk about what he and the First Lady are going to be doing today.
Yeah, Chris, in the background, I can hear Marine One on the South Lawn awaiting the president and First Lady. They'll be heading to Florida and Georgia this morning to tour areas devastated by Hurricane Michael. Their first scheduled stop is Okaloosa County, Florida. The president this morning tweeting that he's going to visit with FEMA, first responders, and law enforcement. He says maximum effort is taking place. Everyone is working very hard. Worst hit in 50 years. All this comes just hours after the president backed away from his claim that climate change is a hoax and pushed back against the idea that it is man-made, arguing that climate scientists, in his words, have political agendas. This was part of that 60 Minutes interview where he acknowledged the climate is changing, but said it'll change back. He said he no longer believes climate change is a hoax, but in his words said, but I don't know that it's man-made, adding, I don't want to give trillions and trillions of dollars. I don't want to lose millions and millions of jobs. All of this sort of cast in the America First ideology of this president as it relates to everyone from Vladimir Putin to what's taken place recently in Saudi Arabia and Kim Jong-un as well when it comes to climate, like the political climate. The president says it's the results that matter. And that's why he's trying to put the emphasis there on things like the economy, even if it comes at the expense in the eyes of a lot of critics of the climate. Back to you, Chris.
Peter Alexander, thank you for that. Let me bring in my panel. Chris Wilson, a Republican pollster and CEO of the political research firm WPA Intelligence. Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com and an MSNBC political contributor. Bobby Ghosh is editor and columnist at Bloomberg Opinion. So much to get to, so we're going to try and get to a lot of the sound from the president last night. Let's start with climate change, Bobby, because this is kind of one of those head scratchers where Trump said, no, not a hoax, but maybe not man-made, maybe it could go back. Let's listen to the president.
I'm not denying climate change, but it could very well go back. You know, we're talking about over millions of years. They say that we had hurricanes that were far worse than what we just had with Michael.
Who says that? They say. You mean the people on the phone?
People say that in the...
Yeah, but what about the scientists who say it's worse than ever?
You'd have to show me the scientists because they have a very big political agenda, Leslie.
You know, one of the things that struck me about this, Bobby, not just, you know, I was so glad to see her challenge him on they say, which he says a lot, but then we never know who they are. But the other side of it is that whether it's the intel community or it's scientists at NOAA, he often rejects whatever the not just commonly held belief, but proven beliefs are on any given topic and makes no apologies for it.
Well, it's a very familiar trope, and we've heard this before from people on the far right who deny climate change. He's just picking up talking points from them. And what he did there with Leslie Stahl is try to have it both ways. Says, yes, climate change is real, but I don't have to do anything about it because it's not man-made, and it'll come back. It'll all get good again. So he's making excuses not to
But how?
act.
I mean, I guess that I'm like, well, okay, maybe it'll come back, but how?
I don't think we can question this president on science. His grasp on science seems to be as flimsy as his grasp on foreign policy. So he just completely skated past that question. I think it's one of those things which, as a journalist, I can imagine how Leslie felt. You could take the whole of that interview just trying to pin him down on this one question, and he would still find ways to prevaricate and to slide it out. It's a frustration with dealing with people like that who simply won't look at the facts on the ground. When you say scientists, he'll say, which scientists? He'll say 97% of the scientists. He'll say, but there are these 3%, and why should I believe the 97? And not? These are very, very... Now, these are the kinds of things we've heard sort of fairly nutty people say for decades. Now, the idea that these have now gone so mainstream that they're coming out of the mouth of the president in the White House, that's the really scary bit.
So, again, I want to go through a bunch of other stuff. The president wins a clear victory, right, with Brett Kavanaugh, but he couldn't leave it at that. So he was asked about going after Dr. Ford. Here's that clip.
And you mimicked Professor Blasey Ford. You mimicked her.
Had I not made that speech, we would not have won. I was just saying she didn't seem to know anything.
No,
and you're trying to destroy a life of a man who has been extraordinary.
Why did you have to make fun of her?
I didn't really make fun.
Well, they were laughing.
What I said is the person that we're talking about didn't know the year, the time, the place.
Professor Blasey Ford got before the Senate and was asked, what's the worst moment? And she said, when the two boys laughed at me, at my expense. And then I watched you mimic her, and thousands of people were laughing at her. Do you think you treated her with great respect?
I think so, yeah, I did.
But you seem to be saying that she lied.
You know what? I'm not going to get into it because we won. It doesn't matter. Well, we won.
Well, he is right, Jason, about that. They won, but they would not have won if it were not for him, although the timeline doesn't exactly support that.
Yeah, look, Brett Kavanaugh was going to win because you have Republicans who are in charge of the Senate, and they wanted that seat, and that's what Mitch McConnell's been talking about for years. That's not the issue. The president's a liar. We all know the president's a liar. The president doesn't like women unless they're women under his direct control, so of course he doesn't like Dr. Blasey Ford. The president saw himself in Brett Kavanaugh, which is the only reason that he was as passionate as he was, and he wants to take credit for anything and everything that happens in Washington, even if his behavior is often sometimes negative. But again, I think even a larger issue here, and this is the president that a minority of people in this country wanted, people filled with hate and rage and supposedly economic anxiety. But the other thing to consider is this. This isn't only just driving women away from the Republican Party, but it is a reminder that the president can't be trusted to stay on any kind of message discipline whatsoever.
I mean, one of the things, well, but it's also he's counting on this to help him in the midterms, right? And there will definitely be Republicans who say, once again, he has delivered on what he said.
Yes.
But if you look at the most recent polling, it suggests that actually what happened with Brett Kavanaugh is going to work for the Democrats.
It'll work. Well, no. For Republicans, it's going to work in the Senate. The Republicans' Senate polling has been very good since Kavanaugh because voters are focused in those red states on the Senate. You've seen it help Ted Cruz. You've seen it hurt Heidi Heitkamp. It's not going to help in the House.
But the polls show that it's more likely to. Democrats say they're more likely to vote as a result of the Kavanaugh.
That is true. Democrats are more likely to vote. But again, I think it helps Republicans in the Senate, but it doesn't change the fact that we have a lying president who hates women.
Well, let's talk about the Mueller probe, Chris. He's still not making any promises on that. Let's listen to it.
Will you pledge that you will not shut down the Mueller investigation?
Well, I don't pledge anything, but I will tell you, I have no intention of doing that. I think it's a very unfair investigation because there was no collusion of any kind.
But you won't pledge?
There is no collusion. I don't want to pledge. Why should I pledge to you? If I pledge, I'll pledge. I don't have to pledge to you, but I have no intention of doing that.
I have no intention, Chris. Do you read that to mean I'm not going to do that, or I don't know, I'm not going to do that before the election?
You know, I think the whole problem with this line of reasoning is look, the president knows that Russia tried to influence the election. We all do. But this has become...
Do you think he knows
I do.
That?
I think since the day after the election, this has become a process of Democrats trying to delegitimize his election. And so it makes him very defensive toward it. And frankly, it makes many Republicans very defensive about the entire process because rather than accepting the results of the election, it becomes Democrats saying, well, it's not fair because Russia got involved, or it's not fair because of what Vladimir Putin did. And that's I think, the underlying issue of what
But is your suggestion that if a Democrat says it's clear, based on the intelligence that has been put forth by this own administration, they did indeed, and Republicans who have seen intelligence that we don't know about say, obviously Russia tried to interfere, does that necessarily mean that Democrats are trying to delegitimize his election?
Well, if you're saying that Russia interfered,
because I've heard plenty
and
of Democrats complain about Hillary Clinton and the way the campaign was run.
Well, there's that too, but those two are not really related. If you're saying Russia interfered and therefore he was elected, yes, that's delegitimizing it, and that was part of the process of the Clinton campaign immediately following the election, getting together and figure out we have to find a way of explaining why we lost an election that we should have won.
Yeah, no, that's not what happened. So the actual time, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. The White House literally talked to both. They talked to Mitch McConnell and Republicans and said, hey, look, the Russians are trying to interfere in our election. It happened before Trump got elected. So to suggest when you have all of this, no, that does. It does. It has exactly to do with it. Because what you're saying is it has nothing to do with it. And it does. When the President of the United States said, hey, look, Mitch McConnell, Republicans and Democrats, there's a situation here where the Russians are trying to interfere. We want to make sure the election's clean. And Mitch McConnell and the Republicans said, if you talk about this publicly, we will claim you're trying to delegitimize Trump 2 months before the election.
Let me play another clip. Let me play another clip about that, about Russian interference. We know, Bobby, he hates any suggestion his victory wasn't all because of him. So let me play that exchange.
Do you believe that the Russians interfered in the 2016 campaign, election?
Well, they meddled. But I think China meddled too.
But
and
why
I think
do you say China meddled too?
And you want to know something?
Why do you say China? Why don't you just say the Russians meddled?
Because I think China meddled also. And I think, frankly, China is a bigger problem.
You're diverting the whole Russian thing.
I'm not doing anything. I'm saying Russia, but I'm also saying China.
Bobby, not just Russia, but China.
Well, here's the problem. When you diffuse and divert like that, it prevents you or gives you an excuse not to do anything about it. If Trump can say that, well, lots of people were involved and there's not just one party, then it means that his administration feels under no pressure to do anything about it. We can argue till the cows come home about who interfered and how much in the last election, but if we keep doing that, we're not going to make the sort of right defensive measures to prevent the be interference in our next election. There's one coming just weeks down the pike, and there's already been alarms from within the administration that the Russians will try to hack it again, and of course they will. If they can get away with it the first time, they will get away with it. They will feel that they can get away with it over and over again. So this is not only about the past; it's about the present and it's about the future. It's also a message that he's sending around the world. The countries. I'm now based in London, just across the water from Europe. There's plenty of evidence of Russia trying to hack into multiple elections around the world, and the fact that the American president continues to give essentially the Russians a free pass on this has a tremendous repercussions across the world.
I want to ask you guys, because we're almost out of time, really quickly, the big picture, because I thought this was a fascinating interview. I thought Leslie Stahl really challenged him. He seemed a little bit off of his axis a couple of times, and she was not backing down at all. But, you know, he said twice, "I'm not a baby." And then he says, "I'm president and you're not." I don't think Leslie Stahl was ever under the illusion that she somehow was president of the United States or considered running for president of the United States. What did you take away big picture as a Republican from this interview? You
know, I think that was his version of Obama saying that elections have consequences. And that was kind of a different manner of trying to express the fact that he is in the seat of power and he is exercising his rights as president and winning the election.
Did he strike you as being a little more isolated, saying there are a lot of people he doesn't trust? He talked about, you know, that there could be some more changes. Didn't look good to me, what he had to say about General Mattis.
Yeah, I think, look, I don't want to comment or don't really have knowledge to comment about what's going on inside the White House. I think if you look into what he is doing, his actions, and the impact it's going to have on the November elections, right now, that is positive from the standpoint of what he's done with the economy, what he's done with Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, you go for point after point that many of what he was kind of trying to get back to last night in the interview, that's what I took away from it, is wanting credit for the places where he was having success. He doesn't feel like he's getting the coverage from the mainstream media that they should be.
What did you take away from it?
This is the same president that's been in office for 2 years. He's incompetent, he's rude, he's emotionally unstable, and generally speaking, he tries to take credit for things that either happened in the previous administration or a result of Mitch McConnell and Republicans in the House and Senate.
But he did get Kavanaugh. He did get tax reform. They went through the whole list of things that he has accomplished.
That is Mitch McConnell, and that is the Republicans in the House and the Senate. This president, if anything, has been a drag on a very clear-eyed agenda by Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. If he would shut up and say to the American people what they want him to say, they probably could have gotten more done. They probably could have gotten rid of the Affordable Care Act if Trump hadn't engaged in some of the behavior that he engaged in. I actually think he is a drag on what is sometimes a highly sophisticated, even if problematic, group of leaders in the Republican Senate.
Bobby, we are really out of time, but how much play is this getting over there?
Well, it gets a lot of play because it is the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, the man who has it in his power to either do tremendous good or great harm. In a serious way or in a mocking way,
focused on the foreign policy part of it?
Well, I think if you ask an average man in the street, there is a certain amount of mocking, a certain amount of humor to be taken from this. But policy makers around the world, governments, military leaders around the world, those who represent our allies as well as those who represent our foes, this has been taken deadly, deadly seriously. And there's not a lot of comfort in that interview for our allies. There's a lot of comfort for hard men, strong men around the world, people like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin and others.
Guys, you're going to stay with us. Bobby Ghosh, always good to see you. Hope London's treating you well. And